Hey, welcome back to Whip Tips. Today we're going to go into episode 3 of CRV 123, and today we're going to go through how to get the steering knuckle off of a suspension that is completely rusted and frozen from neglect and having lived up in New England. So let's get started with that bluegrass. All right, so if you didn't watch episode 1, go back and watch it now. Today we're basically trying to get the steering knuckle free, and here I am spraying it down with yet more penetrating oil. I think he's used a whole bottle in this area. Long story short, it didn't really help or do anything. So what we're really getting ready to try and do here is take off the end links, the sway bar end links there. And to do that, you're supposed to use an Allen key and a crow's foot wrench. Use the Allen key to keep the stud from spinning, the crow's foot wrench to, undo it. In this case, this is an early project of mine. I didn't have the right tools. I used an adjustable wrench. It wouldn't have mattered. The stuff was just so frozen solid that no matter what I tried, I couldn't get it free, couldn't get it undone. So I resorted to my favorite tool in my toolbox, the Sawzall. Make sure you've got a metal cutting blade. And the Sawzall is your friend, especially when in this case, the only thing I wanted to salvage was the steering knuckle. I didn't care about the control arm. I did want to protect the sway bar, but everything else didn't care about. Just be careful not to cut the brake lines. And I'll show you here in a second where to actually do the cutting. So what you want to do is get between the boot and the sway bar and do your best not to cut into the sway bar. So here's a little more diagram here, and it's going to take a few minutes, but if you've got a sharp blade, it'll do it, and you'll be glad. So here I'm trying to get the steering end link off, and you've got to first remove the I believe there's a cotter pin there in the castle nut, so you gotta deal with that, and if it's rusted, it can be a challenge. But in this case, you can see I use clippers so that I can cut stuff short if I need to, and you got to bend the cotter pin ends back so that get it all straight as possible. And then in this case, I was able to just take a small hammer and kind of start it out that way. And then finish by just yanking as hard as I could with the whatever those things are called, those pliers that cut, and wiggle it back and forth, and eventually it'll work itself free. Yeah, be careful of your knuckles, because sometimes they do snap out very, very quickly. And then, of course, you've got to undo the castle nut. In this case, I can't remember what the size was, but this also was rusted really, really well, and so I had to keep wrenching at it for quite some time. Now, this CRV, I may have said this already, sorry if I'm repeating myself, it came from New England, and it was not well maintained. So, I don't know if anybody had ever changed the end links on this thing. At 172,000 miles, these may have been the original ones. So I'm gonna cut from here. I mean, eventually you get the castle nut off, and from there you're good to go to get to knock the stud out of the. I believe this is attached to the strut, not to the knuckle itself. Okay, so this tool right here that you're seeing in the drawing, I have one now. I didn't have it then. This is a great tool. So basically that thing levers up against the end of the stud. And what I had was a hammer. And so again, since I didn't care about the strut, didn't care about the end links, I wasn't going to reuse this. This thing was all rotten and everything. I just hammered until I could finally knock that thing out. So I think I started with the small hammer. I don't know if I went to my bigger hammer. Let's watch and see. I've got a bigger sledge, like a 4.5 pound sledge. And you can see nothing was working on getting that thing. It was fused to the metal. There's the big boy. So it hit that a few times, and then eventually, boom, pops out. Now you're going to have to do kind of the same thing with the lower control arm to get the ball joint out down there. And this was also a nightmare. So the first thing you have to do, it's the same as it was for the steering end link. You got to remove that pesky cotter pin, straighten everything out, and then try and knock it out. And I'm struggling with it here, but eventually I got it. Good. Then you're going to take your ratchet and you're going to undo that. And this was frozen pretty well as well. So it took me a while to get it free, but eventually got that off. Actually, in fact, that's not the case. I forgot that what happened was the castle nut got really stuck, and no matter what I tried, I couldn't get the thing off. So I kept it on and started the process of hammering until I could free the ball joint. Now, in this case, I was tired at this point. I gave up trying to hammer it, and you can see I'm trying to see if that has any effect on loosening the nut. I could tighten it, but I couldn't loosen it. So I just took a break and went to the pinch bolts for the strut itself to the steering knuckle. And those are big boys, and you can see right here I had to break them free, I think, first with a breaker bar, because those had fused to the strut itself. And but you know, once I got those bolts broken, and you can see it's fighting me here, but I'm using a long breaker bar. Once I got those bolts broken, then it was fairly easy to finish the job of getting them out. It's really a lot of, with these bolts, it's really a lot of, you know, finding the right socket size. You've got to secure the other sides, because once you break it free, it'll start to spin. So you've got to secure the other side, which is what I'm doing here, and then you can start to ratchet it out, and eventually get those things removed from the holes they're in. And doing that, I think, was a bit of a chore, involving a lot of wiggling and maybe a little bit of light tapping with a hammer, and the use of a pry bar as well. But here I'm having trouble just by hand trying to get these things unspun. But eventually it came out, and I got the nuts off of the end of both bolts. Like I said, to get those bolts out, you just kind of have to wiggle the steering knuckle up and down, side to side. And in this case, I was able to actually pull it out by hand, I think, and then did the same one for the upper one. But like I said earlier, you may have to use a pry bar or maybe a rubber mallet or something like that, but eventually they'll pop free. Now back to the ball joint and the lower control arm. What I'm doing here with pounding is I'm still trying to free the ball joint stud from the steering knuckle. And eventually, after using the sledge and having it free here, it actually worked. It came free and was loose and would go up and down, but I couldn't get it off the steering knuckle because of that damn castle nut. So what I wound up doing was, essentially, I decided first I'm going to go ahead and remove the lower control arm from the frame itself. And this is a drawing of the lower control arm, where the bolts are. You remove the front bolt and the back bolt. One's vertical, one's horizontal. And before you do that, remember that you have ABS lines attached. So there's an arrow pointing to where you detach the ABS line. Set your caliper on a bucket. I've set it here aside so it's not stretching the brake line. And then go to town on those bolts. I'm not going to go through the whole process of showing you how I remove two bolts. But essentially, once I got that control arm removed, I was able to remove the whole assembly, put it in a vise or something, and then go to town with the Sawzall. And I basically sawed between the castle nut and the steering knuckle, and then eventually got to this point, which is, here's my steering knuckle. You can see kind of in the right-hand side of it there is where I sawed off the actual nut. So that's it for this video. At this point, if you go through this process, hopefully your castle nut won't get rounded and frozen at the end of your ball joint. And appreciate you watching. We're going to do the next video, episode 4 for CRV 123, up shortly, and I believe it involves getting the snap rings off of that steering knuckle. Removing what is probably an old and in very dire need of replacement bearing from the steering knuckle, and some other things. So thanks for watching. Doc out. Oh, you made it to the end. That's awesome. Listen, I'm Doc. I'm the one who's, the voice behind these videos. And I really appreciate you taking the time to actually watch the whole thing. That's fantastic. If you've got time, if you want to, if you like the video, hit like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to hit the bell button so you get notified of new videos when I put them up. I'm going to try and do one a week. And I'm going to do a bunch of Instagram stuff, so make sure you follow me there and on Twitter. Instagram's going to be the shorter stuff. I don't have any merchandise yet. I'm planning to, as the channel grows. If I succeed, I'll get some merch. For now, if you really want to help me in another way, you like these videos enough, I'm going to put links to my books in the description of the video. I'm a science fiction author in my spare time as well, so I'm juggling a lot of balls. But anyway, I really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you at the next one. Hey, do me a favor and turn this junk off. I don't know how to deal with tech.